So my perspective is that as marketers, we spend a lot of time telling our audience things, right? Like we tell them we have a new product, we tell them it's great, we tell them they should buy it, but we really don't spend enough time showing them why they should care about those things. So if I wanted you to care that the American prison system is broken in a way that disproportionately impacts women and their families, I could tell you a stat like this, that over the past 3 decades, the number of women serving time in American prisons has risen more than 8-fold. It's far higher than the rate of men. But it's just words on a page. It's hard to relate to. It's hard to know what it means. Slightly better, I could show you a chart, and you could see a chart like this and see that sharp rise and have a sense of, okay, this is pretty dramatic, but still, what does that mean? The best way to do it would be to tell you the story of Rusty Miller Hill. Rusty is a woman from my hometown of New York City. As a young woman, she got mixed up in kind of the wrong crowd. She was having a hard time supporting her family because the father of her children had left, and she ended up selling drugs to make ends meet. She was ultimately arrested and given a 2-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense for being present during drug deals. And while she was in prison, her children were put into foster care. But when Rusty got out of prison, she learned her children had been adopted. And Rusty hasn't seen her children in 20 years. Now, all of these things are true, the stat, the chart, and the story, but I'm willing to bet that only one made you feel something. That's the difference between showing and telling your audience things. In fact, show don't tell is one of the very first things they teach you in journalism school. I studied at the University of Connecticut. I got my undergraduate degree in investigative reporting, and this was the thing that they stressed all the time, that it's not our job, if we're a good journalist, to tell our audience what to think or how to feel or what to do, but to paint a picture, to give them enough information so that they can make those choices on their own. Because the reality is we like our own ideas much better than other people's ideas anyway, right? So if we can make someone have those opinions on their own, they're going to be much more strongly held. So as useful as this is in journalism, where our mission is to inform, it's incredibly useful in marketing, where our mission is to sell. We want them to make those decisions on their own in the same way, so we too must paint a picture for our audience. I didn't always really realize this, the need to kind of put your audience's needs before your own. And I think the best story was when I was 6 years old, my dad told me I was finally old enough to pick out my own present for Mom for Mother's Day. So he took me to the mall and he threw open his arms and he's like, "Where do you want to go? The mall is your oyster. Whatever you want to get, Mom, we'll get it." So I thought, what would I want more than anything in the world? And the answer is a box of rainbow plastic jewelry. So that's what my mom got for Mother's Day. And with the kind of love that only mothers possess, she took out the rainbow rings and the bracelets and the necklace and the tiara because it was the good box. And she said, "Thank you, but your audience is not your mama, and they're not going to be so kind." So in order for us to have that kind of relationship with our audience, we truly have to provide them value. We have to put our audience's needs at the center. And one of the really challenging things here is oftentimes the content we want to give our audience as marketers is not the content that they want or need. So the challenge is to find the middle ground there where we can still put our message forward, but in a way that's adding value and that our audience actually comes back for and shares and reads time and time again. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to share with you 5 key principles from the world of journalism that you can apply in your content marketing, so hopefully you're able to create content that has that same impact that we have with our favorite newspaper or our favorite magazine, that we know, like, and trust, that we look forward to that content and we feel a loyalty to that content. We're going to use truth as our guiding principle, not because you should tell the truth, although please, for the love of God, tell the truth. That's sort of a given, hopefully, if you're here. But because it's an acronym to help you remember these 5 things. I had the liberty of going through many years of school. I got my master's degree after I graduated in arts and cultural criticism. So I've tried to distill it down in an easy-to-remember way so you get these 5 key points and you can take them back to your team. So the T, the first T in truth, our truth acronym stands for teach. So most journalists, the T means timely, right? Most journalists, we're writing about things happening in the here and now, so current that when you see something on Twitter and it's a half hour old, you're like, that's not news anymore. I know, I knew about that. But for us as marketers, that's a lot more difficult. If you've ever tried to get anything out in a week's time, you know what that means, right? You've got 5 agencies and the legal team and the PR team, and somebody changed their mind halfway through the week, so you had to start over. So the timely content is not always our specialty, but the great thing about content that teaches is that it has incredibly long lifeline. right? So in journalism, we would call this evergreen content. It's the content you make today that's as valuable today as it is tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. But in order to do that, you do have to step outside of your products and services because those things are cyclical. The things that your audience is always going to have questions about, the things that your audience is always going to be going to value are going to be those things that teach them something. Because someone's always looking for information, someone's always making a decision, someone's always encountering a challenge of some kind. So here's some of the ways you can teach your audience things. These are some of my favorites. So the first is DIY and how-to. This is probably the most obvious one. This is why we saw that massive rise of the hands and pans videos on Facebook. We got hands stirring and dumping things. And has anyone, just curious, made any of those recipes? You have? Wait, that's never happened before. What did you make? I have to know. Oh, so I didn't mean while you were filming it. I meant like after. That's never happened before. That's amazing. Okay, so yeah, but so even if we're not always making the recipes, unless we're him, we love to consume them because we like to learn things. We're curious creatures, and so if you can teach your audience how to do something, give them the steps to a process, walk them through something, it's the kind of content they come back to again and again and are more likely to share with others because if they're having that challenge, other people in their life, in their company, in their family or community are probably having that challenge too. The next one is a deep dive. So this is the kind of stuff I used to love to do when I was a journalist. This is when you fully immerse yourself in a topic or a process or something. And deep dive content really answers a question like, what's everything I need to know about blank? And you can probably do several versions of this in your business, whether it's about a key person, a process, an ingredient, a specific challenge they're making. Maybe they're about to make a purchase decision and they want to know what questions do I need to ask? What are all the things to consider? These are the things, questions to ask before signing a mortgage, right? When you're like, I've never done this before. What do I need to know? By creating deep dive content that goes into all the possible factors here, you get a piece of content that's super valuable for your audience and also has some nice SEO benefits as well. Profiles and features are really, really fun. This is, in journalism, this is where you see a piece of content that's all about a person. But for our purposes, it shouldn't just be people within our company. You can certainly write a great profile about your founder or your chief engineer or someone who's worked for your company for a long time, and those things are great. But you can also look outside your company. So if you're a local company that's really heavily rooted in your community, talk to the mayor about what's so important about the city, what's so great about living there, right? Talk to your customers, your vendors, your community partners. All of that's going to help show the heart and the people who are a part of your organization, and people relate to people, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. And the last one is behind the scenes in history. So sometimes people are like, people don't care what we do. We just sit at a computer all day, right? Or it's not interesting what I do. But there's a whole show called How It's Made that literally just takes you into factories and shows you things moving and flipping, right? So people love this stuff. We love to see worlds that we don't usually live in. And as weird as that might seem, if we don't feel our jobs are super exciting, I think we've all had that moment when you're at the mall and you see the pizza guy or the guy making the pretzels and you just can't stop watching, right? It's so simple, and he does that 1,000 times a day, but it's not what we do, and so we're interested. So there's probably elements of what you do, what you create, what you offer that you could take people behind the scenes. This is one that works particularly well on social media. So, going behind the scenes on your Instagram stories, Snapchat, if that's still a thing. All of these are really great opportunities because it's more casual content. It's not going on the permanent record of your feed or something, and so it gives you a chance to be a little more casual and conversational when you take people behind the scenes. All right, so the R in our TRUTH acronym is for reputable sources. So this is a particularly important one. One of the challenges we have as marketers, obviously, many of us are in heavily regulated industries where it's very difficult for us to put out content because of liability and regulation. Bringing in reputable sources helps overcome a lot of those hurdles. It makes it much easier for things to go through legal, and it also takes some of the liability off you, which is really nice because you're quoting others. But the other thing it does is it adds a lot of trust value to your content. It's the reason why we get a little skeptical if we hear about an anonymous source. You're like, I don't know if I can trust that person because I don't know who they are. It's the same reason you read a story that only has one source in it, and you're like, is this an outlier? Is this the only person who's saying that, or is this actually a trend? So you can take some of that into your content marketing by bringing in reputable sources. Now, in journalism, we spend a lot of time getting taught how to search far and wide, how to do what we would call ethical stalking to track down reputable sources. So I'll give you a quick deep dive on some easy ones so that you don't have to feel like an icky stalker. So the first one is academic sources. Academic sources are my favorite. So these are like professors, researchers, deans, things like that. These are great for a number of reasons. First of all, whatever standards they had to meet to publish their papers or their research or their content is stricter than whatever your legal department's going to come up with. So they got pretty trustworthy information. The other thing is that they're generally held on contracts that govern their behavior. So they're unlikely to be the folks, if you're working with influencers or something, who are going to get a DUI or make some crazy statement on stage somewhere. They're generally pretty reserved folks who carry themselves very professionally, which makes them brand safe for you, and that's wonderful. The other thing is they are super, super passionate about what they do. They chose probably the least paying version of whatever they studied because they want to teach people what it is, and they want to share it with people. And so they are generally very willing to share information about what they've researched, to talk about the applications of the things that they're doing, and they can, again, add a lot of credibility to your content. The next one is influencers. This is a pretty obvious one. I know there's probably sessions here, over the course of the last couple of days where you could have learned more about that. But influencers are good because your audience already knows, likes, and trusts them. The only thing to be aware of with influencers, more than some of the other ones on the slide, is that they're most likely to ask for payment for being a part of your content, so that's another perk of using academic sources instead. So the next point I want to make is that you may be able to find reputable sources within your company, and that's wonderful. You should absolutely talk to your chief engineer, talk to the designers, whoever it is that has that authority and that expertise within your company. Definitely bring those voices in. But whenever possible, you should look to corroborate that with third-party data, because more voices are more powerful. More voices are more trustworthy. So if you can bring in others who are backing up what you're saying, what's coming from inside your company, your readers are going to trust that content that much more. And the last point on sources is that diversity is really important when it comes to sources. It's really easy for us, to get caught up with the same people. Even as journalists, this happens. You get one line to one person at town hall, and suddenly you're quoting them in all your stories because you know they're going to pick up the phone, right? So it's really easy for us to go back to the same voices time and again, but it's important for us to find other voices. So think about diversity in a lot of different ways. Diversity in terms of people inside your company and outside, of both genders, of various races, of different age groups, of different physical ability, and the easiest one to forget, of people who live in different areas. I remember when I was working at the New York Times and the first editor of brand content there, we were building content for brands that lived on the New York Times property. We had one writer who only quoted people from the New York City metro area. And I was like, I know these are your friends, I know this is where your network lies, but our readers aren't just in New York. We need to have voices from other parts of the country. We need to have voices from overseas. So whenever you have that opportunity to bring in voices from different parts, maybe outside of your immediate area, that's also going to help more people relate to the content and more people trust it. So the U in our TRUTH acronym, the third key to journalistic storytelling, is uniqueness. And this one makes me the bad guy, because a lot of the stories we want to tell are not newsworthy. And this is a real challenge, right? So, one of the things they teach you when you first get to journalism school, it's a common axiom. If any of you are former journalists, you probably heard this from that first professor, the really grizzled one. You remember the guy. He said, when a dog bites a man, that's not news. Dogs bite people every day. But when a man bites a dog, that goes on the front page, right? Another way to think this is like, you don't read a story about a plane that didn't crash. 300,000 flights take off and land in the United States every single day. With the rare exception of like a doctor being dragged off a plane or an emotional support peacock, it's not usually news that that's happening. And unfortunately, we've gotten into sort of a press release mentality when it comes to our content, where we might think that everything we do is newsworthy. And in our eyes, because we worked so hard on it, because we have a whole team who's excited about it, that's definitely the case. But in the broader world of our audience, where they've got a million things going on in their lives, the fact that our product comes in a new color doesn't even begin to register on the radar of what they care about in the day. So our challenge is to take some of that journalistic mindset of mining for unique perspectives and unique ways of telling stories, so that you can make sure that people are going to care about the things that you're saying as much as you care about them. So here are some ways to do that. If you've got a story and you're like, there's something missing here, it's just not doing it, these are some of the things you can look for. Hopefully you're the first or only of something. That always helps. Everyone likes if it's the first time something's been done, or you're the only company doing something a certain way, or the only one to offer a certain service. That in and of itself is newsworthy on its face, right? That's the kind of thing that probably goes well over with your PR team, because you're going to get actual press coverage for that, right? That's a big indicator of something being newsworthy. If you are not the first or only, there are a lot of other adjectives that will do as well. So biggest, best, longest, oldest, tallest, shortest, most green, whatever that might be. Look for those est so that you can go ahead and find a way to bring in that unique element. It's the reason why, I don't even want to estimate how many sandwiches Subway puts out every day, but the first time somebody makes a 7-foot-long sandwich, it is everywhere, right? You're seeing it. It's on all the news stations. There's like pictures of people with a giant sandwich. Suddenly we care because it's the longest. So we can definitely look for those kind of adjectives to help bring our content up a level. The other thing is if there's something different or surprising. So again, there's a lot of content sameness that we have to contend with. Many of our competitors may be making content about a lot of the same topics. So one of the things you can do is try to find a different or surprising way to tell that story. So, a DIY, historically was done with steps of a process written out. So that's why once we started doing the videos that showed all those processes, that thing took off because it was like, I'm not used to being able to watch steps to a process. That's unique for me. When a new format comes out, podcasts, VR, AI, chatbots, everyone's jumping in because it's different and it's exciting. So look for those different and surprising elements and different and surprising ways to tell your story. That'll help you stand out and combat that content sameness. And then every now and then when I'm consulting with a brand, they say, this is causing me a real crisis of self because I've realized that we don't have as many differentiators as I thought. I don't know what I'm going to say. We're not the biggest or the best or the longest or the first, and I don't know a surprising way to tell this story. That's when I always encourage you to look to the journey to get there. Because even if you had that misfortune of trying to sell a very similar product or not being able to find one of these differentiators in the moment, the journey to get to that story or the journey to get to the place where you are as a company, as an individual, was definitely unique. So in journalism, we see this when you see this story. This guy quit his Wall Street job and moved to Hawaii and opened a dog grooming studio. And you're like, that's not special at all. There's dog grooming studios everywhere. But the fact that his journey to get to that point was so different and so unexpected, it's the journey that makes that actually interesting. So you may be able to find some of those elements in what you're doing as well.